So I made a visual to help you discern where you're at, kind of like a roadmap, where you are and where your partner or the person across from you may be, so that you can start to distinguish with clarity different personality or characteristics, rather, of where people are at on this spectrum. So, as you know, I teach it masculine to feminine, but there's several layers to it. And hopefully, this will start to make sense. So, this middle line is masculine to feminine, just human masculine to feminine. This takes into account our biology, the biological differences, how that impacts our brain, our perception of things, the ways that our upbringing or societal norms have maybe shaped us differently, in addition to the biology, the ways that things have played out for us experientially based on our biology, is going to be indicative of this middle spectrum, the masculine to feminine, man to woman spectrum. This is actually where I find most people have the most difficulty discerning. And so I wanted to include it as well, because you're not new to my work. I know you know about the empowered spectrum, the empowered masculine to empowered feminine here up top, and this wounded spectrum down on the bottom, this unintegrated masculine to feminine spectrum. It's this middle line where most people get hung up. And so I want to go into deeper detail on that specifically. So as you know, we are going to be coming to the middle, integrating, and then creating polarity. And what that's going to require is that we move through a phase of acceptance of our humanness, which is going to create a sense of humility as we rise. There is a sense of humility based on self-acceptance. So that's part of this middle line here of integration. When people are more integrated, they tend to have this sense of humility and self-acceptance, which does create safety around them. Emotional safety is going to be available around these people because they are so accepting of themselves. They don't have this hierarchy anymore, and therefore you feel safe around them just because the odds are really good that you're going to be accepted around them too. Whereas down in this unintegrated space, there's very much this hierarchy of safety where, you don't have to be the fastest person, you just have to be faster than the person behind you kind of scene. I've heard that said about being chased by a bear. So same thing here. It's a survival mechanism. It's not helpful, and yet it is something unconsciously, mostly unconscious down here. This is below this middle line of humanness. This is mostly in our unconscious when we're behaving these ways. And so it's not, again, to judge anyone who is behaving in these ways, but it is to bring that awareness to light so that you can start to integrate that, come up to this integrated space, and then move in polarity. So I want to start in this unintegrated space because we have on one end the wounded feminine, which is going to be behaving more with the codependency type tendencies, which is going to be either pulling someone into your inner tube, if you will, or trying to get into someone else's. So a very controlling, pulling dynamic where you feel overly responsible for other people and you have a hard time feeling the correct amount of responsibility for yourself. This is going to play out as wishy-washy. They're not going to be able to stick with things. They're chronically overwhelmed because they're taking on so much responsibility that belongs actually to other people. It's going to feel like chronic overwhelm. When you've been in this spot, again, been there, it's not something that you are necessarily aware of, that it can be different. And so I want to bring to light that this is something, if you're experiencing this might be where you find yourself. Since they're chronically overwhelmed, they're going to naturally be expressing more of a victim energy, that victim or child energy where life is happening to them. They aren't exuding agency, the agency that would come in when that empowered masculine energy pulls that part of her up to the elevated level, that empowered feminine, where the empowered masculine brings this wounded version up to the empowered feminine level. And they're probably going to have some childlike behavior. This is where like tantrums are going to play out. Again, this isn't necessarily just women who are going to have wounded feminine energy. This can also play out in men when they are the nice guy, when they're not getting their way, they're not in the relationship dynamic that they feel like they should be, and they have a little tantrum. They feel hurt and rejected when it's not intentional. Not to invalidate that feeling, but this is where that wounded feminine energy can come out in men, otherwise masculine men. That can also play out as quiet quitting at work, allowing relationships to just unfold and continue to unfold even when you know that it's not a good fit. That's definitely going to be characteristic of wounded feminine energy. And again, it doesn't matter if it's masculine or feminine, typically. I'm sorry, a man or a woman. Wounded feminine energy, again, is different than that. Wounded masculine is on the other side of the spectrum. It's also going to be very controlling, but this one has a very pushy quality to it. So if you feel like you're being bullied or being pushed into something, that's a different feeling than this pulley energy where you're being manipulated and cajoled into something. This is going to be the controlling, pushy energy that someone is trying to exhibit or to get you to move from where you are. Often these are going to display as narcissistic tendencies, all about me, arrogant, grandiose, not necessarily a narcissistic personality disorder. We have a whole episode on that. Feel free to go listen to the distinguishing factors between those two things. This is just wounded masculine energy. And again, we can all oscillate between any of these spectrums here. But this is also going to be where they have really rigid rules. They're going to call them boundaries, but they're more like walls, like a brick wall that you hit when you try to get close to them or when you ask for something to change. It's going to be that kind of teetotaler energy of like, nope, not at all, absolutely not. Instead of having the willingness to discern for yourself what is appropriate in that moment. So, little distinction there. They're often going to be dismissive and struggle with uncontrolled aggression. This is going to be the outbursts of anger that you don't necessarily feel is grounded or appropriate for the situation. It's a little more volatile. And then unwilling to compromise. This is different. This is the unwilling to compromise in the rigid boundary sense. This is different than unwilling to compromise who they are in themselves. This is something that I think is a really important distinction. So a lot of times the similarities in the wounded spectrum are going to be giving to get, either pushing or pulling so that you can get what you want, being out of touch with what you need in order to give. The distinction that I make for people who are empowered and are giving from a very generous place is that you know that in order to give $100, I have to have $101 in my account. And even with that, I'm not going to give $100 if all I have is $100 because I know that I need X amount in order to maintain myself. So it's if you need me to pick up Sarah from soccer practice, then I'm going to need you to take this off of my plate so that I can do that. That's a healthy, interdependent relationship dynamic. That's not what is going to happen when someone's operating from this unintegrated space. So often they aren't connected with their voice. They're usually not really connected with their body sensations much at all either, but especially not with their voice. They're not quite sure how to express themselves, and they do tend to express from this child energy, this smaller than themselves energy. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they shrink. If they find themselves more on the wounded feminine side, they might shrink. If they find themselves on this wounded masculine side, they may get really big, but it's still a very childlike expression. It's not I need some affection or I'm needing a little bit more reassurance that comes from this grounded, centered space. It's well, fine, I guess you don't like me anyway feeling, or you never call me anymore kind of blaming energy. Because they externalize their sense of worth, they're going to be really tied to how people perceive them. That's going to be their looks, their possessions, their accolades, how compliant they are, how compliant they can get other people to be, and how well they're behaved. So it's going to be very much externally focused, kind of like living in a fishbowl a little bit, where everyone's opinion of you is more important than your own. That's what's going to keep you from validating or keep you validating being validated from the outside, because all of our worth is outside of us. So we are going to be willing to sacrifice things that are really important to us, that are in line with our values and in line with what's best for us, because our sense of security is coming from other people. It's coming from the outside and how well we are keeping other people happy. So this is going to be really indicative of this unintegrated or kind of unconscious way of moving through the world. They also don't tend to see opportunity in growth. They will again be presenting as this victim type or victim archetype, where the world is, doing them wrong. They can't ever catch a break. And again, this isn't to invalidate genuine experience, because when you are in this unintegrated space, life is kind of happening to you. You don't have that sense of integrated agency to move through life in a way that does honor your needs and your values. But they don't see that as an opportunity to learn and integrate. They see it as repeated proof that life is unsafe and that they will never get ahead. And then again, they're mostly unconscious, living in this child energy where everything around them is bigger than them and is going to be threatening to the nervous system. So when we're in this unintegrated space, the best thing that we can do is to bring gentle, compassionate awareness to what we are experiencing. And that's what I think is so helpful about having a map like this, so that when you start to identify, wow, that makes a lot of sense, that really resonates with me, I would encourage you not to shame yourself with this new information, but rather use this information as a way of saying, okay, that means that I have some work to do, some compassionate work for myself. That's going to move us into this middle space where we're just human, where we are allowed to have flaws and be imperfect, and notice how your body responds. This is where physiology is everything. Our body is pre-programmed to make it easier for us. And therefore, our nervous system is going to be operating with this unconscious information in an effort to make it easier, so that we aren't having to think about things all the time. And so if you're noticing you're having to think about things a lot, I would use it as a helpful reframe that I have learned, is that that's actually a sign that you are growing. The fact that you're having to think about it means that you're moving from this state of conscious incompetence, where you don't know what you don't know, into conscious competence, where you do know what you do know. And that's going to be moving up that spectrum. So the differences here that I think really I see a ton of breakdowns happening is that men don't understand women and women don't understand men. We project onto each other the way that we would do it, and therefore we get our feelings hurt. We take it really personally when they don't behave the way that we would have behaved in that situation. And so I want to shed some light on that. I've already shed light on that in Arise and Rooted, so feel free to, I think I've gone deeper into each of these in those programs. But very briefly, the woman's brain is wired different because it's estrogen. We are in an estrogen dominant body. Our brain is going to be receiving information differently than a testosterone dominant body. Estrogen spreads our awareness across like almost a field, if you will. We're able to pick up on lots of different insights, lots of feedback. If there's critters running around or if there's bushes over there, we're going to start paying attention to all of these things, because that's how our brain is wired. It's also going to cause us to follow a hormone cycle, and our estrogen, depending on stage of life and time of the month, our estrogen is going to be higher or lower, which is going to impact our mood, how we feel about things, and also what we are able to accomplish in the world. And so it really is a very different experience than a testosterone dominant body, which is very consistent. Heard it said that a woman's hormones are like the moon phases. They change over the course of a month, and a man is like the sun. It repeats on a daily cycle, more of a 24-hour cycle. And so it's very consistent that each day, the time of day is going to be what determines how you may feel in a man's body, whereas the time of the month is going to determine how a woman's body responds to different stimuli. It could be the same situation and she's going to show up differently depending on what day of the month it is, which can be really exciting because every day can be a brand new experience. You can learn a lot of new things. So they are going to be motivated by connection. And again, if we think about this on a biological, more tribal level, this is going to be where our safety was. Safety was in numbers, and that's still the case for a lot of women. That being said, since they're motivated by connection, they are going to be experiencing safety, the feeling in their nervous system of safety when they are connected to people, and therefore pleasing equals safe. When we are more pleasing, people are willing to connect with us. It's easier to create connection, and therefore women will sometimes do things that men will not understand, where they'll call it people pleasing, and it can be a wounded feminine tendency here to be people pleasing, but typically being pleasing or being compliant or fitting in is a safety mechanism for the estrogen dominant body. If she were to be too out of line, she's going to risk being kicked out of the tribe. So if we think about it from that sense, your body is going to start registering tension when you are going against the grain, and depending on how much work you've done, how much consciousness you've brought to that, you may or may not elevate into this empowered feminine woman where you're able to say, no, this doesn't work for me, because this is going to be what's taking over. So just a little point of awareness there. And then one other thing I wanted to point out is that really for women, details do matter. And men may not understand that because they're singularly focused. They're focused on the task at hand, the mission at hand, what they're doing right now, and they may not be as focused on the details, because for an estrogen dominant body, the experience is what we're after. We want to experience our favorite feelings, or we want to experience life in a certain way versus just the outcome. Men are very focused on results, and therefore their attention is going to be on the outcome. And that is a definite distinction that I see between men and women. Is she's about creating an experience and wants for an experience to be created, and he is about getting the result and may not be as focused on the experience of getting there. So since men are naturally testosterone dominant, it's going to increase their ability to focus, have that mental clarity, and run a lot more masculine energy. So you may be able to do more tasks, again, because your hormone cycle is based on a daily cycle. You wake up and you're about the same on a daily basis, and therefore you can create a lot of output. And so I just wanted to make that distinction too, that it's not that she is less capable, it's just her ability to create results is going to be very different than a man. So again, driven by results, that provider protector wiring is really amazing in men, and it's definitely different than women. Women do have masculine energy when they have kids. That masculine energy is what is there to keep those kids safe and keep them alive. And yet there's something very unique about the way men flow masculine energy as it pertains to this protector and provider energy. Last thing I want to say is that the hierarchy for men is what creates trust in a tribal sense. I was explaining this the other day. In a tribal sense, hierarchy equals trust, because when you are operating with people around you, you want to know that our values, we have a shared vision. And therefore, I am willing to submit to your leadership if I know that our vision is the same. There is a hierarchy of trust that increases trust. This is a little different than the hierarchy that's created down here, in that this hierarchy is you're not promoted when you haven't proven yourself trustable with the tasks that you are being promoted to accomplish. We want to know that you can create these results before we promote you. That's very much how men operate. And so there is an implied sense of trust that comes with rank that is unique to men. Women don't operate that way. Our sense of trust is based on social proof. So I just wanted to point that out. So now that we have created that, we're going to integrate and come into this integrated spectrum here. Integrated people are typically going to have a lot of these commonalities, and I've only mentioned a few because there's a lot, but these are ones that I use to identify someone who is more integrated and more empowered as a general rule. So they have a lot of clarity about who they are, which means that they've done some inner reflecting. They're aware of their values, what motivates them, what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and therefore they're willing to honor their own boundaries. So it's kind of a chicken and egg situation. They have clarity about who they are, and they are willing to honor their boundaries, and they have boundaries, which gives them more clarity about who they are. They also have a self-care practice of some sort, mental, emotional, and physical. People who are integrated, and this is not a judgment, this is something that they value because the experience of being cared for is a priority of theirs. Once we have come out of this unconsciousness and increased our consciousness, our self-worth tends to rise as well. And we start to realize, actually, I want to feel cared for. It feels so good for my body to feel cared for. Therefore, I'm going to be responsible to move it. I'm going to be responsible to seek medical attention. I'm going to be responsible to seek emotional support, to seek mental support, to give ourselves what we need. That self-care is, I would say, indicative of someone who is in this integrated space. It doesn't matter if they're man or woman. They're able to express their perspective, even if it's unmatched. Again, it takes a lot of empowered masculine energy to support having a differing opinion. When we think about individuating, we don't live in tribes necessarily anymore. I mean, we have families, but we don't live in a tribal space where literally our survival is dependent on agreeing with everyone else. And so that individuation process, as we're rising into this integrated space, requires that we start to express ourselves and what we are thinking and feeling, even if other people around us don't necessarily agree. That's where we create new tribes and create new segments of people who do agree with us. We can find those people easier when we're able to express that. I find that these people tend to be in service of something higher. Again, because there is this humility, they are in service to something greater than themselves. This has actually been statistically shown too, that our mental well-being improves when we're in service to something grander. And that can be on a spiritual level, or it can just be a good thing to be aware of, that being able to serve something outside of ourselves keeps us out of this wounded masculine kind of narcissistic, the world's about me type thing. We have something that I am willing to share with the world because I have been put here with a purpose and I am getting after it. And they're open to receiving support. I think that is the distinction. Not only do they desire deeply to be of support, they also receive support and are able to receive support. Again, this doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman. Both sides have have some work to do in terms of letting receiving support be normal and feel good. But once you are in this integrated space, you realize, hey, there's actually only so much that I can accomplish on my own. And I actually need support. If I'm going to keep integrating and keep rising and keep expressing with the world what I'm here to do, I actually require quite a bit of support. And so we get really good at receiving support when you're in this integrated space. Again, they're able to suspend the judgmental point of view. We don't see people in terms of hierarchy anymore. We see people as, wow, that's interesting that that's how they do it. We see them as different than ourselves. There's enough self that you don't feel threatened by someone else's self. That's how I describe it to clients. And so this person has enough boundaries in order to see, wow, that's different from me, and cool. It's fine. It can just be different from me. I don't have to, finagle it to see my way. I don't have to comply. We don't play in that world anymore. We can just see it as separate from ourselves and like it or don't, move towards it or don't, because you have this sense of agency. This is very much the king and queen energy space. And I love those archetypes because we all know what regalness feels like, to be in the presence of royalty, not in a princess or prince kind of entitled sense, but there's this queen or king energy where you feel them when they walk into a room. You can feel this sense of importance and yet servitude. There is a willingness to go to battle for protection of their responsibility, of their kingdom or queendom. They are willing to go to battle, and they're willing to put the needs of people that they are in charge of and responsible for as a priority. And yet they also are willing to be the leader and be supported by the community around them. So there's lots of cool things that we can play with that archetype, the king or queen archetype. But I feel like it does have an energy of importance, but not, it's a humble importance. Like, yes, I know that I am the center of attention and that people are here to be of service to me, and I don't take my position lightly. And you can take that to mean what you want with the king and queen archetype, which I think is so fun about archetypes. But they are unwilling to uncompromise. They're not, sorry, they're unwilling to compromise themselves. They also wouldn't ask someone else to compromise themselves. They know that, hey, this is my value system and I can't operate outside of it. And if you were to say, I can't do that, they would honor that, because they know that if you were to compromise that, it would be dropping all the way down here. And that is a no-go for them. So it's either a win-win or it's a no-go. We are either both winning or we're both losing, because if you have to give up who you are as a core piece of moving forward with this agreement, then I've lost the war for the battle, if you will. And so that's something that's super indicative of someone who's in their empowered energy. And again, I've already mentioned the humility. So let's talk a little bit about let's talk about the empowered masculine. I love the empowered masculine energy, because empowered masculine energy is like the key to all of these. We have to have this empowered masculine energy because it's going to give us the clarity to see ourselves. We can see ourselves as different from other people, and it's also going to give us the boundaries and the agency that we need in order to rise from this unintegrated space up here to this integrated space. So I teach a lot about the empowered masculine energy because I have yet to find an upper limit to it. Because the more empowered masculine energy we get, we only get these really great qualities from it. Obviously, the empowered masculine spectrum, men are able to expand their own view of what masculine energy means, but the masculine energy is this stability. And so the more of it that we have, the higher that our heart gets to rise. So just in terms of men, I'll just speak here with the masculine energy. This is going to be the conviction, the clarity, the certainty, the problem solving, the rational thinking, the logical thinking, the big picture, the one who's able to see, like, well, we don't want to do this right now because we actually need these resources over here too. So let's come up with a win-win here so that we can all get what we need and to be responsible for creating the outcome that we're looking for. Alternatively, the empowered feminine is such a beautiful energy space to be in. This is a woman, and I'm going to speak here for empowered feminine. This is connected with the heart. So the empowered masculine is going to have empowered feminine energy online. The wounded masculine needs what the empowered feminine brings. The wounded feminine needs what the empowered masculine brings. That's how we integrate and rise together. And then we separate again to create conscious polarity. So empowered feminine energy is going to be gracious and honest. Again, this actually doesn't matter gender, because there are men who need to be more gracious in their honesty. We don't want to just be honest with no love. That's actually unkind. And we don't want to just have love and no honesty. Also unkind. I didn't make that up, but I don't know who said it originally, so you'll find it and quote it for me. But they do feel safe to be around because they live in this open-hearted space. They almost have this aura around them of safety, where your nervous system just feels like, oh, this is the mother archetype. This is the queen archetype, the healer archetype. There's lots of archetypes that are empowered feminine. We also have the dark feminine archetypes, the seductress, there's lots of them. I just think they're so fun because they let us kind of play with different parts of ourselves that maybe we haven't felt safe bringing online. The empowered feminine energy, what you really want to take away is that this is an open-hearted connection point where they are able to speak from the heart. They speak truthfully. They're honest and integrous in themselves. And this is another distinction between masculine and feminine integrity. The integrity of the empowered feminine is the truth of the moment by moment intimacy. This is what's happening in my heart. This is how I'm feeling. This is what I'm experiencing right now. Whereas the empowered masculine integrity is a broader sense of showing up in a noble way, having a sense of right and wrong, that you are living in accordance to your value system. A woman, or the empowered feminine, will speak her truth or his truth from the heart. What's true for my heart may be different than the values that I have. This moment, I may be experiencing sadness, and that lets me know that the values I have are not in alignment with what's happening. So we really want this harmony of the two. We want to have both ends of the spectrum integrated so that we aren't lopsided. So that being said, an empowered feminine woman will present as able to say no graciously and with kindness. Again, because she has integrated some boundaries. It's not going to be a rule that they are following. It's going to be more of a felt sense of this doesn't feel right for me. And that is because they are, I keep saying she, but you know what I mean. They're connected with some spiritual connection, the higher power, the Holy Spirit. This is what is guiding the empowered feminine energy being manifest in someone's expression. It's going to be a direct connection to spirit, and therefore they are going to experience the world in a more connected way, because we are all connected in a spiritual sense. They're able to see the similarities where the rational brain would see differences. And so that is an indicator of empowered feminine energy. And because the self-worth and self-esteem are internalized, they are willing to say no and stand on their own 2 feet. They're not going to be waffling around based on what other people want them to do. They do have a sense of inner security where if this doesn't feel right for me, I'm not judging what you're doing, but I am removing myself. I am enforcing my boundaries. I'm releasing myself from the people pleasing that I would otherwise experience down here. And they're able to create support, because the empowered feminine requires softness in the body in order to animate. Kind of like clay, you can't really shape it if it hasn't been worked. And the empowered feminine energy won't be able to animate if it is trying to run through a stiff body. And so the empowered feminine expression is going to require a lot of support. And that's where the strength of her masculine partner, I'm going to go into man and woman here, the strength of her masculine partner is going to, or her own empowered masculine energy, is going to create a stable ground for her to rest on. This is going to be the systems that create more ease for her, so that she's not falling into this overwhelm and controlling energy that often will close down someone's heart, because we just don't have time for emotions when we are operating in this spectrum. And so that's something that I wanted to share, is that when a woman is expressing empowered feminine energy, it does require quite a bit of support. She will have her own masculine energy online, and if she is seeking a masculine energy man, she is going to be leaning on him with her vulnerabilities. In order for her to share her vulnerabilities with a masculine man, she has to be able to feel that support. Again, it's going to come from her own masculine energy first, and then a visible representation of consistency and support and aligning of values for her to naturally unfold. It's kind of a flower effect. We can't rush empowered feminine energy in opening and expressing. It is something worth waiting for, really, because it's kind of like a flower in that way. And then over here again, masculine energy is going to be this strength, this sturdiness. And it's not that a masculine energy, an empowered masculine man doesn't have empowered feminine energy integrated. It may be 20, 30%, but he still needs to have the graciousness. He still will be able to say no and be connected to God or the Holy Spirit or a higher power. There is a connection point that is activated for him that allows him to speak lovingly and to open his heart in a vulnerable way and allow for connection. So I hope you're seeing the difference here. When we're creating conscious polarity, you will most likely find yourself dominantly in one or the other camp. And what we're looking for when we're looking for a partner is these qualities in the middle. We want for most of these qualities in the middle for both of us to have, because you can't create an empowering relationship dynamic where both people aren't clear about who they are or able to take care of themselves and ask for what they need, where they aren't in service of something bigger than the other. Otherwise, we're hiring a maid, or we're hiring, a servant. That's not a loving relationship, where there is an ability to see other and suspend judgmentalness and compromise, but not to the point of compromising themselves. We want to create win-wins. These are all green flags when it comes to building partnership, because these are in service of healthy partnership dynamics. When you play in each of these domains, you're going to be complementing each other, but we also are going to have lots of these overlapping. So I hope that helps. And hopefully this is a roadmap for you to be able to see, hey, these are some areas that I noticed my last partner, found themselves operating more like this. And I wonder, counterpart wise, was I operating at that level, or was I up here or down here? Kind of where were you? What was the dynamic showing you, so that you can integrate that information and move forward with more clarity about yourself and what you are needing, so that you can find yourself in this integrated space more often and find a partner that meets you there more often. So I hope that helps.